Imagine you are flying. The sun is warm on your skin. The deep blue of the Atlantic Ocean stretches out below you like a calm glass carpet. You are a U.S. Navy pilot, a victor of World War II. You are in an Iron Bird, a PBM Avenger, the toughest torpedo bomber ever built. You are with your brothers, 5 planes in total, flying in perfect formation. It's a simple 2-hour training mission, a milk run. You turn your plane to head home, but then your compass starts to spin. The sun, which should be to your west, seems to have vanished. The ocean, once blue, turns a sickly, milky green. Your radio crackles to life. It's your flight leader, his voice tight with a strange, cold panic. "I don't know where we are," he says. "We seem to be lost." Then, just before the static takes over completely, you hear a final, chilling transmission from another pilot. Everything looks strange, even the ocean. We are entering white water. And then, silence. You, your plane, and your 14 squadron mates have just flown off the map. You have not crashed. You have vanished. This is not fiction. This is the true, terrifying story of Flight 19, the real-life disappearance that gave birth to the world's most enduring mystery, the Bermuda Triangle. Hello and welcome to TSF History. We are your channel for the most shocking, incredible, and often overlooked stories from our past. We dig deep to find the facts behind the legends, and today we are tackling the one that started it all. Before you do anything else, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a journey into history's greatest enigmas. You won't want to miss what's coming. Our story begins on December 5th, 1945. World War II had ended just months before. America was breathing a collective sigh of relief, and its military machine was the most powerful on Earth. At the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the mood was professional but relaxed. The pilots stationed there were the best of the best. The training missions they ran were routine, designed to keep their skills sharp. On this clear, beautiful Florida afternoon, 14 men were scheduled for a routine training flight designated Navigation Problem Number 1. They were divided among 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers. These planes were not delicate fighters. They were beasts. Known as Iron Birds, they were famously durable, reliable, and equipped with the best navigation tools of the day, including compasses, radios, and emergency life rafts. They were, in essence, considered unsinkable, uncrashable in anything but the most extreme combat. The leader of this flight, Flight 19, was Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor. Taylor was a seasoned pilot with over 2,500 flying hours and combat experience in the Pacific. He was a capable, confident leader. But he had one small, crucial vulnerability. He was new to Fort Lauderdale. He had only recently been transferred from the Naval Air Station in Miami. This meant he was intimately familiar with the geography of the Florida Keys, south of Miami, but less familiar with the Bahama Islands, which lay east of Fort Lauderdale. This one simple fact would become a deadly variable. The other 13 men were trainees, but they were not novices. They were all qualified pilots and radio men completing their final stages of combat training. They trusted their leader and their machines implicitly. The mission was simple, almost boring. They were to take off at 2:10 p.m., fly due east for 56 miles to a spot called Hens and Chicken Shoals to conduct bombing practice. After that, they would fly north for 67 miles, then turn for the final leg, a long diagonal flight of 120 miles heading southwest back to the base. It was a simple triangle. In clear weather, with a calm sea, it was a flight a novice could complete. At 2:10 p.m., exactly on schedule, the engines of the 5 Avengers roared to life, they thundered down the runway, and lifted gracefully into the perfect blue sky, banking east over the coast. The control tower watched them go, just another routine flight, dots disappearing against the sun. They were expected back no later than 5:30 p.m. For the first 90 minutes, everything was normal. The flight reached the bombing grounds, conducted their practice, and then turned north just as planned. But then, something went terribly wrong. At approximately 3:45 p.m., long after Flight 19 should have made its final turn to head home, The control tower at Fort Lauderdale received a stunning radio transmission. It wasn't from Flight 19, but from a senior flight instructor, Lieutenant Robert F. Cox, who was flying a different training mission nearby. He had overheard a panicked voice on the radio. Cox called the tower, "One of the flights is lost." A few moments later, the tower's own radio crackled. It was Lieutenant Taylor, the leader of Flight 19. His voice was not panicked, but it was strained, confused. He said, "Both of my compasses are out, and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down." This transmission sent a jolt of pure confusion through the control tower. The Keys? That was impossible. To be over the Keys, Taylor would have had to fly south, not east and north. Based on his flight plan, he should have been hundreds of miles away, over the open Atlantic, northeast of the Bahamas. The tower operators immediately radioed back, telling him to fly north, toward the sun, which would take him toward the Florida peninsula. But his reply was chilling. He said he didn't know which way was west. The sun, in his eyes, was gone. He was utterly, completely disoriented. On the radio, a terrifying drama began to unfold, all of it captured in fragmented, static-filled transmissions. The tower operators and Lieutenant Cox desperately tried to guide Taylor in. They told him to switch to the emergency search and rescue frequency. He did. On that channel, they could hear not just Taylor, but his men. The trainees, it seemed, knew something was wrong. One of the student pilots was heard saying, "Damn it, if we could just fly west, we would get home." Another transmission, believed to be from a student, was even more direct. "When we get to 200, we should be about home." This implied they were flying over the Bahamas, just as they should be, and simply needed to head west. But Taylor, the veteran leader, was convinced he was over the Gulf of Mexico, on the wrong side of Florida. He believed his compasses were broken, and in his mind, the islands he saw below him had to be the Florida Keys. He was suffering from a classic and often fatal case of spatial disorientation. He overruled his students. He made a fatal decision. Believing he was in the Gulf, he ordered his flight to turn and fly east, thinking it would take them over the Florida peninsula. But he was already in the Atlantic east of Florida. His order was sending his 5 planes and his 14 squadron mates deeper and deeper into the vast, empty expanse of the open ocean.
As the afternoon wore on, the situation grew more desperate. The perfect Florida weather, as it often does, began to turn. The sun started to set, plunging the lost squadron into darkness. A squall line moved in, kicking up high winds and churning the sea into a white-frothed nightmare. Flight 19 was now lost, in the dark, in a storm, and, most critically, running out of fuel. Taylor's radio transmissions became more and more erratic. He was heard repeating, "I don't know where we are." He seemed to be handing over control to another pilot, then taking it back. The confusion was total. Then, at 6:20 p.m., the control tower heard the last faint, horrifying words from Flight 19. The transmission was broken, almost swallowed by static, but the words were clear enough to haunt the listeners forever. A voice, believed to be Taylor's, was heard saying, "We'll have to ditch unless we strike land. When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together." Then, silence. A few minutes later, the base's radio operators tried one last time to get a fix on their position. They heard only a faint, unintelligible sound, like a radio keying on and off. And then, nothing. Flight 19, with its 5 unsinkable planes and 14 experienced airmen, had vanished from the face of the earth. But the horror of December 5, 1945 was not over. In fact, it was about to get exponentially worse. As soon as it became clear Flight 19 was in serious trouble, a massive search and rescue operation was launched. Among the first planes sent up was a PBM Mariner flying boat with a crew of 13 men. The Mariner was a huge, reliable search plane, but it had a well-known, sinister nickname, the Flying Gas Tank. Its massive fuel reserves made it perfect for long-range search missions, but also made it a flying bomb if anything went wrong. The Mariner, call sign Training 49, took off at 7:27 p.m., heading directly for Flight 19's last known position. At 7:50 p.m., just 23 minutes into its flight, the Mariner radioed its base with a routine position report. And then, just like Flight 19, it went silent. It never radioed again. It, too, had vanished. However, this time there was a witness. A merchant ship, the SS Gainesmills, was plowing through the heavy seas in that same area. At around 7:50 p.m., the ship's crew saw something that made their blood run cold. They reported seeing a massive, brilliant fireball light up the night sky. It looked like a great burst of flame, which then fell, burning into the ocean. They sailed to the spot and found a massive oil slick, fuel, and debris burning on the water, but there were no survivors. The flying gas tank had, for reasons unknown, exploded in midair with the force of a bomb, incinerating its 13-man crew instantly. So now the toll was catastrophic. In the span of just 5 hours, 6 military aircraft and 27 men were gone. The next morning, the U.S. Navy and the Coast Guard launched one of the largest air and sea searches in history. For 5 days, hundreds of ships and planes scoured over 300,000 square miles of the Atlantic Ocean, from the coast of Florida to the Bahamas and beyond. They were looking for anything: an oil slick, a piece of wreckage, a life raft, a body. They found nothing. Not a single trace of the 5 Avenger planes, not one life vest, not one scrap of metal. It was as if 6 planes and 27 men had been plucked from the sky by an invisible hand. The official Navy Board of Inquiry was baffled. They had no wreckage and no bodies. All they had were the disturbing radio transcripts. Their initial report, released a few months later, was a simple, brutal conclusion. Lieutenant Charles Taylor was to blame. They ruled the disaster was caused by pilot error. They claimed Taylor had become confused, mistook the Bahamas for the Florida Keys, and led his man out to sea. This verdict destroyed Taylor's reputation and devastated his family. His mother, Catherine Taylor, refused to accept it. She argued that the Navy was making her son a scapegoat for something they couldn't explain. How could a 2,500-hour veteran pilot make such a simple mistake? And if he was so confused, why did his compasses fail? Why did the other pilots, who knew they were east of Florida, still follow him to their deaths? She launched her own investigation and campaigned relentlessly, pressuring the Navy to reopen the case. Finally, in 1947, the Navy relented. They reviewed the evidence and, in a stunning reversal, amended the report. The final verdict was changed from pilot error to cause unknown. And with those 2 words, cause unknown, a legend was born. The public and the press were not satisfied. How could 6 military aircraft and 27 men vanish in an area so close to home, an area that was patrolled and flown over every day? The theories began to fly. This incident, more than any other, became the foundation for the myth of the Bermuda Triangle. Author Vincent Gaddis, in a 1964 magazine article, coined that very phrase, the Bermuda Triangle, specifically citing Flight 19 as its most baffling mystery. Suddenly, the region became a limbo of the lost, a supernatural black hole. People began to link Flight 19 to other disappearances in the area. The USS Clytrops, a massive Navy ship that vanished with 306 souls in 1918. The Star Tiger and Star Ariel, 2 passenger planes that vanished in the late 1940s. A pattern was emerging. The explanations grew wilder. Was it aliens? Were the planes and their crews abducted by a UFO? This theory was popular, fueled by the pilots' strange radio calls. Everything looked strange, even the ocean. What did that mean? Was it a portal to another dimension? a time-space warp that swallowed them whole. Some even pointed to the mythical city of Atlantis, claiming its powerful energy crystals lying dormant on the seabed were shorting out compasses and disintegrating aircraft. The white water transmission was seized upon. This wasn't sea foam from a storm, theorists claimed, but a bizarre, unexplained phenomenon, an electronic fog that drained power and confused the senses. Of course, there are more logical, if less exciting, explanations. The most likely scenario is a tragic, cascading series of human errors and bad luck. Lieutenant Taylor, new to the area, genuinely did become disoriented. He mistook the Bahama Islands for the Florida Keys. His compasses may have been working perfectly, but because he thought he was in the Gulf of Mexico, the compass readings looked wrong to him. He trusted his mistaken instincts over his instruments. This is a known phenomenon called cognitive dissonance. His men, despite their own doubts, followed their leader's orders as they were trained to do. When he ordered them east, he took them not to safety, but to the deep Atlantic, where the ocean floor drops off to thousands of feet. By the time they realized their critical error, the storm had hit, darkness had fallen, and their fuel was gone. They would have been forced to ditch their planes at sea. A PBM Avenger weighing over 10,000 pounds would not float. It would hit the water and sink like a stone, likely in less than a minute, taking the crew with it. In the high seas of a storm, in the pitch black, survival would be impossible. The PBM Mariner's disappearance is less mysterious. The Gaines Mills crew saw it explode. A spark in the fuel-rich cabin, a lightning strike, a simple engine fire. Any of these could have turned the flying gas tank into a fireball. And the wreckage? The Avengers, sinking in thousands of feet of water, could easily be lost forever, especially in 1945. The Gulf Stream, a powerful and fast-moving current, would have scattered any surface debris from the PBM explosion over hundreds of miles in just a few hours, making discovery impossible.
And yet, the mystery endures. It endures because of those two words, cause unknown. It endures because despite decades of searching with high-tech submarines and sonar, not one single shred of wreckage from Flight 19 has ever been definitively found. 5 identical planes, gone. It endures because of the chilling radio calls, the confusion, and the sheer, awful finality of that silence. Flight 19 was not just a training accident. It was the moment a routine flight plan became a terrifying legend. It was the day a patch of ocean off the Florida coast became the most feared and mysterious place on Earth. It was the mystery that started it all. What do you think really happened to Flight 19? Was it a simple, tragic case of human error and a violent storm? Or do you believe that something more sinister, something unexplained, was at play that day? Let us know your theories in the comments below. Thank you for joining us on this journey into one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries here at TSF History. If you found this story as fascinating and chilling as we did, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to share it with a friend who loves a good mystery. And if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you can be the first to know when we unravel our next historical enigma. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.